Hey there, Karenology speaking. This story is packed with twists, turns, and pure insanity.
The morning started like any other for John Miller. The soft hum of the barn's fans blended with the clucking of chickens and the distant mooing of cows. His farm, nestled on 50 acres of land, had been his sanctuary for 3 decades. But as he sipped his coffee on the porch, he noticed a sleek black car pulling into the gravel driveway. From it emerged a man in a suit, clutching a thick folder, and Karen, his smug neighbor from the newly built housing development. "Mr. Miller," the man called out as he approached. "I'm from the Westwood Homeowner Association. We have urgent matters to discuss." John squinted at him, confused. "Homeowner Association? This is a farm, not a suburban plot." Karen interjected with her usual condescending tone. "Technically, your land borders our community. The association has reviewed our boundaries and found discrepancies." "What discrepancies?" John's voice hardened. The man in the suit cleared his throat. "It appears that your property has been annexed into the association's jurisdiction due to rezoning. This means you are now subject to our rules and dues." He handed John a document. John scanned the paper. "This can't be legal. I've owned this land outright for 30 years. I've never signed up for any association." Karen smirked. "If you can't pay the dues, the association has the right to foreclose." The words hit John like a ton of bricks. "Foreclose? On my farm? Over dues I don't owe?" "I suggest you consult a lawyer," the man said, his tone flat, before turning to leave. Karen trailed behind, her laughter echoing as they drove off. That evening, John sat at his kitchen table, the document spread out before him. His hands trembled as he reread the fine print. According to the paper, his farm was now considered part of the Westwood Homeowner Association due to a rezoning ordinance passed by the city council. The dues he allegedly owed amounted to thousands of dollars, and failure to pay would result in foreclosure proceedings. He dialed his lawyer, but the conversation offered little solace. The rezoning, though morally questionable, seemed legally binding. "We'll fight this, John," his lawyer assured him, "but it's going to be a tough battle." John's frustration boiled over as he slammed the phone down. He couldn't believe the audacity of Karen and the homeowner association. They were trying to take everything he had worked for. The next day, things escalated. John found a crew of workers dismantling a section of his fence. Karen stood nearby, overseeing the operation with a clipboard in hand. "What the hell is going on?" John shouted, storming over. Karen didn't flinch. "We're expanding the community park. This section of your land has been allocated for public use." "This is private property," John bellowed. "You have no right." "Actually," Karen sneered, "it's association property now. You'll need to take it up with the board." Fueled by anger, John grabbed his phone and began recording the scene. "Get off my land before I call the sheriff." Karen rolled her eyes. "Go ahead. We have all the permits we need." John dialed the sheriff's office, his hands shaking. He could feel his world crumbling around him. But as he waited for help to arrive, one thing became clear. He wasn't going down without a fight. John's phone call to the sheriff resulted in nothing more than frustration. When the deputy arrived, he seemed hesitant to intervene. Karen, with her pristine paperwork and legal jargon, appeared untouchable. "Mr. Miller," the deputy said after glancing through the documents Karen provided, "it looks like they've got permits for this. You might want to get a lawyer involved." "I already have a lawyer," John snapped. "But this is my land. They can't just come in here and do whatever they want." The deputy sighed. "I understand, but it's out of my hands for now. Take it up with the city council." Karen's smug smile grew wider as she watched John's frustration boil over. "See, John, fighting progress is futile. You should just cooperate. It'll be easier for everyone." John clenched his fist but knew better than to escalate further. He stormed back to his house, his mind racing with anger and determination. The next few days brought more chaos. The construction crew returned with heavy machinery, tearing into the corner of his pasture. The rumble of bulldozers became a constant reminder of the battle he was losing. But John wasn't ready to give up. He spent hours digging through old deeds, zoning maps, and legal documents. He discovered that the rezoning ordinance had been pushed through quietly without notifying property owners like himself. A pattern of signatures from city council members and the homeowner association raised red flags. Something wasn't right. John's lawyer, Michael, was equally suspicious. "This reeks of corruption," Michael said during a late-night call. "The association couldn't have done this alone. Someone in City Hall had to approve it. So what do we do?" John asked. We dig deeper, Michael replied, and we make noise. If they want to fight, we'll give them one. John took Michael's advice to heart. He started documenting every violation he witnessed: trespassing workers, damage to his property, and harassment from Karen. He reached out to local news outlets, sharing his story in hopes of gaining public support. Within days, reporters were on his farm, filming the destruction and interviewing John about the injustice he faced. Karen was livid. She confronted John while a camera crew was present, her usual composure slipping. "You're making this worse for yourself," she hissed. "The association won't back down, no matter how many cameras you bring." "That's where you're wrong," John retorted. "The truth is on my side, and people will see what you're trying to do." The confrontation made the evening news, and public opinion began to turn against the homeowner association. Viewers were outraged by the blatant overreach, and support for John poured in through social media and local protests. The pressure seemed to work, at least temporarily. Construction halted and Karen retreated to her corner of the neighborhood. But John knew this wasn't the end. He received an email from the homeowner association's lawyer demanding that he cease and desist his public campaign or face further legal action. Michael wasn't surprised. "They're trying to scare you," he said. "It means they're feeling the heat. Don't stop now." Encouraged, John pushed forward. He filed a formal complaint against the city council, alleging corruption and collusion with the homeowner association. The investigation that followed unearthed damning evidence: emails and meeting minutes revealing a backroom deal between Karen, the association president, and a key council member. When the findings went public, the backlash was swift. Protesters gathered outside City Hall, demanding accountability. Karen and her allies found themselves under intense scrutiny, their once ironclad control beginning to crack. But just as John started to feel hopeful, an unmarked envelope arrived in his mailbox. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a foreclosure notice, stamped with the words, "Final Warning." His heart sank. The fight was far from over. John sat at his kitchen table, staring at the foreclosure notice. His heart raced with anger and fear. The homeowner association was clearly determined to break him, but he refused to let them win. He called Michael immediately. "This notice feels like retaliation," John said, his voice shaking. "What can we do?" Michael sighed. "It's a scare tactic. Legally, they'd need a court order to proceed with foreclosure, but it means they're ramping up the pressure. We need to act fast." The next morning, John woke to a disturbing sight. A large sign had been erected at the edge of his property, declaring it future site of Westwood Community Park. Beneath the bold letters was Karen's name, listed as the project coordinator. Furious, John grabbed his phone and recorded a video of the sign. "They're acting like they already own my land," he said, his voice trembling with frustration. He uploaded the video to social media, where it quickly gained traction. Supporters flooded the comments, encouraging him to keep fighting. But the homeowner association wasn't backing down. That afternoon, a group of workers arrived with machinery, intent on clearing more of his pasture. John stood in their path, refusing to move. "You're trespassing," he shouted. "Turn those machines around." Karen appeared moments later, flanked by 2 security guards hired by the homeowner association. "You're obstructing progress, John," she said coldly. "This land belongs to the community now." "No, it doesn't," John fired back. "This is my home, my livelihood. You can't just take it." The confrontation grew heated, with neighbors gathering to watch. Some shouted in support of John, while others muttered their allegiance to the homeowner association. The tension reached a boiling point when one of the security guards tried to push John aside. He stood his ground, and the altercation was caught on camera by a bystander. That evening, the video of the confrontation spread like wildfire. News outlets picked up the story, framing it as a classic David versus Goliath battle. Public sentiment overwhelmingly favored John, and protests against the homeowner association grew larger. But Karen and her allies remained defiant. Michael arrived at the farm the next day with promising news. "The investigation into the city council is gaining traction," he said. "If we can tie their actions to the homeowner association, we might have grounds to invalidate the rezoning." John felt a glimmer of hope. "How long will it take?" "Hard to say," Michael admitted, "but we're building a solid case. In the meantime, keep documenting everything." As John worked tirelessly to protect his farm, the homeowner association escalated their efforts. One night, he woke to the sound of engines roaring outside. He ran to the window and saw a group of masked individuals vandalizing his barn, spray painting the words community property across its side. He grabbed his shotgun and ran outside, but the vandals fled before he could stop them. John reported the incident to the sheriff, but little was done. Frustrated and exhausted, he began to question who he could trust. Even some of his neighbors, who he once considered friends, were now avoiding him or siding with the homeowner association. The breaking point came when John discovered that one of the city council members he had trusted to oppose the rezoning had secretly accepted bribes from Karen and her associates. The betrayal cut deep, but it also fueled his resolve. With Michael's help, John organized a town hall meeting to expose the corruption. The event drew a massive crowd, including reporters, activists, and curious locals. Michael presented damning evidence of collusion between the city council and the homeowner association, including financial records and email exchanges. Karen attempted to defend herself, but the evidence was undeniable. The room erupted in chaos as attendees demanded accountability. The city council announced an emergency session to review the rezoning ordinance, promising a resolution within days. Despite the progress, John knew the fight wasn't over. Late one night, as he prepared for bed, he noticed a car idling near his driveway. He stepped outside, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The car sped off, but not before he saw Karen behind the wheel, her face twisted in anger. John returned to the house, locking the doors and windows. He couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The atmosphere in Westwood was electric as news of the corruption scandal spread. John became a local hero, a symbol of resistance against greed and overreach. But as the homeowner association's grip began to falter, Karen and her allies became more desperate. The first sign of escalation came 2 nights after the town hall meeting. John was jolted awake by the smell of smoke. He rushed outside to find his barn engulfed in flames. The fire roared, consuming years of hard work and memories in minutes. "Call 911, he shouted to a neighbor who had come running. As the fire department battled the inferno, John's mind raced. He was certain this was no accident. By morning, investigators confirmed his suspicions. The fire was deliberately set. John felt a mix of rage and despair as he stared at the charred remains of his barn. Karen denied any involvement, but John knew better. The attack only strengthened his resolve to see justice done. The city council held its emergency session 3 days later. Crowds gathered outside City Hall, chanting in support of John and demanding the reversal of the rezoning ordinance. Inside, Michael presented irrefutable evidence of the homeowner association's underhanded tactics, including payments to council members and forged documents. Karen, seated with her lawyers, looked uncharacteristically nervous. When questioned, she claimed ignorance, but her arrogance had lost its edge. The council, facing immense public pressure, voted unanimously to repeal the rezoning ordinance. The victory was bittersweet. John had won the legal battle, but the scars left by the homeowner association's actions ran deep. His barn was gone, his livestock scattered, and his trust in his community shattered. Yet as he stood on the steps of City Hall, surrounded by supporters, he felt a glimmer of hope. But Karen wasn't finished. Days after the council's decision, John received another foreclosure notice, this time citing unpaid property taxes. Michael quickly discovered that the association had manipulated the tax records, inflating the amount owed. It was their final, desperate attempt to crush him. Michael filed an emergency injunction to halt the foreclosure. The court case that followed was grueling. Karen testified, spinning a web of lies about John's supposed neglect of his property. But Michael was prepared. He presented evidence of the association's tampering, dismantling Karen's arguments piece by piece. The judge ruled in John's favor, declaring the foreclosure notice invalid and ordering the homeowner association to pay damages for their actions. The courtroom erupted in applause as John finally felt the weight of the battle lift from his shoulders. In the weeks that followed, the homeowner association faced multiple lawsuits from other residents who had been wronged. Karen resigned from her position, her reputation in ruins. The association itself dissolved under the weight of legal and financial pressure. John began rebuilding his farm, with help from neighbors who had come to see him as more than just a farmer. Donations poured in from strangers who had followed his story, and slowly his land began to heal. One evening, as the sun set over the rolling fields, John stood on his porch, watching the horizon. The battle had cost him dearly, but he had stood his ground and won. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to smile. But as he turned to head inside, he noticed a figure in the distance. Karen standing at the edge of his property watching him. She said nothing, only turned and walked away. Though the fight was over, John couldn't shake the feeling that she'd return, and this time, he'd be ready.